Welcome to the Ancient Paths Podcast, a journey of unlearning to learn the New Testament church, where we look at what we've learned or experienced and hold it up to the light of Scripture and stories of the New Testament and early church, then discover together how we can return to those ancient paths so the church would thrive and live again. I'm Daniel Sabo, and I'm honored to be your host. And with me today, for the first time, I have my oldest son, Isaiah, who's going to be hanging out with me today, and talking about a pretty cool topic, I think, a kind of an interesting one that I think I was a Christian for a while, honestly, before I really connected dots, or maybe I heard it and just wasn't paying attention. But really, kind of, it's about the question of one of the common, arguments early church time, following the time of the New Testament, really in the New Testament also, was the connection between the New Testament and the Old Testament, and are these two different religions? Is Christianity something that hijacked the Jewish faith and like just stole pieces and parts, or are they really intertwined? And I think one of the really common views, so in Gnosticism, the idea is that all physical things are bad, and then all spiritual things are, good, or that's what is good, is spiritual things. And so the idea that a lot of the Gnostics taught or believed was that the God of the Old Testament was bad because he created matter and created the world, and that is physical, therefore it's bad. And then the spiritual, that's Jesus, and so he's good, and that his physical body wasn't really physical, it just looked physical. Anyhow, so lots of different things. And then there's people today, obviously, that who is Jesus? Was he in the Old Testament? What's the connection, between those two things? But there's a character in the Old Testament that I think really helps to answer some of this question in a very specific way, in a unique way. And there's much more to this conversation than just this one topic. But it's the character of the angel of the Lord.
Yeah.
And so, kind of tell me your introduction to this conversation. Where did interest come from?
Yeah.
And
Um, I mean, for a long time, like growing up in the church, I felt a huge disconnect between the Old Testament and the New Testament.
yeah,
Um, just it's like hearing the Trinity and like as a kid, like the type of like memory verses that you would have, like it doesn't really seem like the Trinity is in the Old Testament at all. Um, but then kind of somewhat recently in the last like few years, kind of uh really like maturing in the faith and like thinking deeply about the things that I believed and I was like, why do I believe this? And
yeah,
then I'd start looking into it and I never felt like there was a doubt or anything, but I was just like, I want to know. Um, and the idea that like Jesus has always been there was a I don't know. It just felt like when I was a kid, the thing that always grasped me about the Bible was like just the reading it as a story.
yeah,
And like when I got a little bit older, still a kid, there was like people saying like there's this many connections in the Bible and like there's this graph of like all the different like this is it recognize this. It's like that sounds super cool. I don't see any of them.
yeah. I see your graph,
Which
but
ones? um and then really reading through the book of John kind of revitalized my reading it as a story. Because to a non-Christian reading the book of John, like it's like it has like a reveal at the end of like, and
yeah,
I am that other disciple, and like reading that of like, oh, like for people like context of like they haven't like just had the Bible, even for non-Christians, like in the periphery of their mind of like knowing some facts about it. Like to just like pick this book up that you don't know anything about it and read it. There's so many cool things in the Bible about that.
yeah.
And then honestly, the you're gonna hate me for somehow tying it back to this, but
Mephibosheth or
but the thing that made me think about the angel of the Lord was that it's brought up in the story of Mephibosheth, which is my favorite Bible
yeah,
story.
it is your favorite Bible
I
story.
love Mephibosheth.
I can never
Um,
say his name right.
and in for the story of Mephibosheth, guy who is son of Jonathan, the friend of King David, is lame. Like his legs didn't work. And then David blessed him, and then later on, his servant, when David's son was rebelling against him, Mephibosheth's servant said, "Oh, Mephibosheth is like, oh yay, you know,
Yeah, we'll be a part of
yeah,
this too. Yeah,
yeah." and that he his servant said that Mephibosheth was like, "Screw David." And then when David came back, and all the examples of like him forgiving his transgressors, Mephibosheth said like, "My servant lied about that." And one like I love the story of Mephibosheth so much. Um, One aspect about it is that David's solution for that is that when his servant said Mephibosheth has betrayed you, he said, "Okay, then you take all of Mephibosheth's land." And then when he came back and Mephibosheth said he just straight up lied, like I didn't do anything like that. I haven't like trimmed my beard since you left. Um, David said, "Okay, you guys split the land," which seems like
So wrong.
that's not a great deal. And yet Mephibosheth is like, he can have it all. I don't care as long as my king is back. Um, and he said, and even before David like came to that conclusion, just seeing him come back, he said, "You are like the angel of God, or like the angel of the Lord," which I know that there's like examples of those being used interchangeably.
Yeah.
But then I reading that, it got me interested in the angel of the Lord, and like reading
Mm,
into that and seeing the concept of like, oh, that's Jesus.
yeah.
And of course, my first thought was tying it back to
You
Mephibosheth.
just revealed kind of a big part to this.
Yeah,
So the angel of the Lord. So there's angels in the Bible, but there's one angel in particular referred to as the angel of the Lord. So you're saying that's Jesus.
yeah,
Okay.
which is awesome and cool.
Yeah.
Which I
So do you have some like what's different about this angel? Why is this different? Why is this angel
Yeah,
different? Because we have Michael and Gabriel, we have, the angels that, revealed the birth of Jesus to the shepherds. We've got all sorts of Daniel, the angel that was caught up with the prince of Persia. And
yeah.
so what's different about this angel?
So the example to me that I think was the most like obvious was Moses in the burning bush, um, where it says the angel of the Lord was in the bush, and
Yeah,
then
so where is that? Exodus 3? The verse 2, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a
yeah,
blazing fire in the midst of the bush.
yeah, that it's saying the angel of the Lord, and then he said, "I am the God of your father, the
Right.
God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Um,
So the distinction between that language, it's
mhm,
saying the angel of the Lord
yeah,
appeared to him in the burning bush. So not an angel of the Lord told him, "Hey, God is speaking to
yeah,
you through the burning bush." It's the angel of the Lord in
yeah,
the bush, and it doesn't say God wants you to know.
yeah.
It says I'm God.
Yeah, and there's even specifically with this example in the New Testament. I wish I would have written it down. I'm so bad at taking notes. But there's an example of Jesus saying, "Before Abraham, was it before Abraham was?
Yeah,
Before Abraham was, I am."
yeah,
And so that like that's kind of like goading along, and then he basically just says it, except for just saying, "I am the angel of the Lord."
yeah,
Of like, like this is the story that most people I feel like associate with the I am.
yeah.
Um, that it just
Well, because there's a lot of examples where people see angels
yeah.
and their immediate responses to bow,
Mhm,
to like worship, to
mhm.
have some sort of response. And the angels are always very
Yeah,
quick to, hey,
yeah,
don't worship me. I'm not the point. I'm not the one. He's the one. But the angel of the Lord is different
mhm,
in that the language that the angel of the Lord uses is I,
yeah.
not he said, because all the other ones there's a very distinct difference in language, and so it's
Um,
pretty interesting.
and kind of looking into it, there was one thing that I saw that was people trying to steer away from it being Jesus was the Jewish idea of, I don't know, I'm bad at pronouncing, but shalia,
Yeah,
of like in law when somebody was sent as a messenger, then they would speak like as that person.
yeah,
But in a lot of these examples, you see one thing that makes it specifically Jesus and not just God is that he'll say like, I say this, and the Lord has done this. And like making a distinction of like, from the Old Testament must have been super confusing of like, before Jesus be like, he's saying that I am God, and also God did this. Of
yeah.
like, is there a distinction? Like uh
When is it the angel? When is it
yeah,
God? When, yeah.
that it almost seems like it's like this super weird thing of like, oh wow, there's God and like there's a different part of him. What the heck? Where'd that
Yeah.
come from?
Well, in the Trinity, the reality that God in three persons,
Yeah,
that language that's, given later, you see it in Genesis because
yeah,
God says, let us make man in
yeah,
our own image. I mean, so even the the language from the beginning. And one of the one of the common things I've heard people say uh, is that God is using the royal we,
Yeah.
that's why, which the timelines of when the royal we
Yeah.
came around and when this was written are so astronomically different that
Yeah.
it's a silly argument. But people really fight pretty hard to say
Yeah.
that the Trinity isn't real. And again, the early church time, the most common uh, points of contention, the most common heresies are about who is Jesus,
Jesus.
what is Jesus, and so modalism of God's one person that just kind of reveals himself in three ways. Not that he's, God in three persons. Adoptionism, that Jesus was just a
Yeah.
guy who was like super cool and amazing. So God adopted and, promoted him to a place of God. Um, and then in John, the book you're
Yeah.
talking about too, it says, from the beginning,
Hmm.
nothing was created except
Yeah.
through him. So this is not some guy promoted. This is
Yeah.
not some later afterthought. Jesus has been from the
Yeah.
beginning, but it's also not that Jesus was at the beginning
Beginning.
and then just never
Didn't do
spoken
anything
of.
and then just showed up later.
Yeah, then just talked later. I think that another one of the great stories of the angel of the Lord is appearing to Hagar.
Yeah.
So Ishmael's mom, Moses and Sarah are supposed to have. I'm sorry, Abraham and Sarah are supposed
Yeah.
to have a kid, aren't having a kid, getting older, promised by God that they would. So, they come up with a plan, sleep with my maidservant. She has a kid, Ishmael. And then, that obviously produces
Yeah.
stress in the family. And so, Sarah wants Hagar to leave. And so she's leaving in a place of despair. Uh, and the angel of the Lord appears to her. So, Genesis chapter 16,
Yeah.
kind of that same idea of the language. Um, Verse 10, moreover, the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants
Yeah.
so that they will be too many to count. Angels don't
Yeah.
multiply descendants. Angels are messengers. I mean, that's really what angel means. And so there's some really different language that's used for the angel of the
Yeah.
Lord versus angels.
Yeah. And even in that example, there's a thing of he's saying, like, I will do this, like, obviously showing Godhood. And then also separation of now we see as, like, God the Son and God the Father
Yeah.
of, you shall bear a son, you shall call his name Ishmael because the Lord has listened to your affliction, like, kind of like making a separation
Yeah.
there, which,
The Father heard
yeah.
you.
And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah, that's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's in other places too. I mean there's in Gideon,
Yeah.
maybe that'd be a good one to turn
Yeah.
to too, of Judges.
Gideon, I believe, is the one um that kind of brings up, like, I believe it's Gideon where he like shows up and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna die because I've seen the Lord."
Yeah.
Um, if I'm not wrong.
Judges 6.
Yeah.
I love this conversation. It's so, I don't know, bizarre is maybe a bad word, but it's one of those things that you can read it a bunch of times and miss it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Judges 6, starting in 11.
11. Yeah. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out the wheat in the winepress to hide from the Midianites. Which, and looking at this, somebody just mentioned out a thing of it's unrelated, but Gideon was beating wheat inside, which isn't a thing that you do. So
Yeah.
he was so scared that he was like
Doing an outside
indoors.
job inside.
Yeah. um. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor." Gideon said to him, "Please, Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you?"
Right. I send you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even there it's and the Lord turned to him, which, like, there's so many like interesting things of like it saying like the Lord and having the angel of the Lord there and being like, at what point is that talking? Or like did God also show up and just start talking
Yeah.
and
Is it
while
the
Jesus
Father
was
and
just
the
standing
Son
there?
working
Yeah.
in together? And yeah,
Um
but there's a clear distinction
yeah.
of difference between. So, I feel like for those who are, listening, maybe hearing this for the first time, the and other people that I've spoken to about this also, this sounds like a thing that maybe somebody later
Yeah.
got tired of reading just regular Bible verses and are like looking for aliens in the Bible.
Yeah.
Like it's a weird. So one of the questions I love to ask, and obviously, a big part of what this podcast is about, is this a new idea?
Yeah.
Is this something that in the last 100 years, as Google searches and the ability to dive deeper into some of this stuff, and just time on hand, that people came up with this
Yeah.
crazy new idea? So I know you did a little bit of research, but this is something that I've studied and read a lot about. Um, in the early church, this was a pretty commonly held
Yeah.
belief. Was it Justin Martyr,
Yeah.
somebody that you had said that you had seen some of the stuff they wrote about? So Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Origen, others too, but a lot of them wrote about this, taught about this. Origen, obviously, you've heard me talk about him a lot, but he wrote the most, and so pretty much any topic you pick, if
Yeah.
he wrote on it, he probably wrote the most on it. Um, but not the only guy, like you said, Justin
Yeah.
Martyr did. I think it was an episode or two ago we talked about the dialogue with Trypha. In that same writing, he talks about uh, the the pre-incarnate manifestation of
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. That this is before Jesus, born of the Virgin Mary, seen in that manifestation, and that view, that physical being. He was revealing himself, before Irenaeus, or Irenaeus, however you pronounce it, in his Against Heresies. Same thing, pre-incarnate Christ, Tertullian, and again the against the praxis that we've talked about in the past, the angel of the Lord's pre-incarnate manifestation of Christ, and then Origen talks a ton about this. And so the word that you'll hear sometimes where Jesus is showing himself in some form, that Christophany,
Yeah.
is another word that kind of gets thrown into this. I think this is more than just um, Jesus showing himself. This
Yeah.
is Jesus,
Yeah.
where he was at work. But I want to read a couple of these quotes, if I can, of what these guys said, and that this was not an afterthought. This was not a um, yeah,
Idea put into
yeah,
the Bible that it was already in there.
right. And part of what I want to talk about too is, why does this matter? What are some of the significance of this? But just speaking to a couple of these, Origin, the angel of the Lord is no other than he who is God by nature, and who is also the angel of great counsel, and of the great counsel, and of the great and wonderful counsel of God. Um, the angel of the Lord is not a creature, but the uncreated God, the
Yeah.
Son of God himself. Um, the angel of the Lord is the word of God, who is God himself, and who is also called the angel of great counsel. And so he's not hinting, he's saying very obviously, that's who the angel of the Lord is. Tertullian, the angel of the Lord is not a created being, but it is the Son of God
Yeah.
himself. He is the Word made flesh who appeared to the patriarchs and prophets in the Old
Yeah.
Testament. That's about as
Yeah.
simple a statement as you
Jesus
could get.
is that guy. That is Jesus.
Yeah. So so these guys clearly taught this, clearly
Yeah.
believe this. This was not an idea added later. Um, this is not a new, crazy kind of idea that people are trying to come up with, in modern day. So why is this significant? What is the importance of this?
Yeah.
What is the application of this for someone today?
Yeah. I mean the small part of this that just struck me, which is this is not everything about it, but just the like reading through the Bible, like I've with like Andrew and a couple other people were doing power read the Bible.
Oh, cool.
Um and
Does that mean you read it while doing push-ups, or
yeah, actually chin ups and you just have the Bible like taped. Just trying to read the Bible and just kind of get the
like reading all
broad
the way
strokes.
through it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um and I when I was younger, it was really easy for me to just read through, because all of this was so like new and fresh. And then I found like as time got older, it's like, yeah, I know that, and so I kind of like skip over parts of like, okay, I kind of know,
I already know
I
what's
get the whole
there.
Moses
Yeah.
story. Um, but in just like going through, seeing, like from, I just got struck of like from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know any of this. This is like the Bible isn't like a old Jewish history book that is dense and hard to read. and super weird. Like there's Leviticus, which is hard to read, but even in there, there's cool stuff. Um, but like this really is like this whole story, like is a like it all points to Jesus throughout the
Yeah.
whole thing, and it's really obvious. Like once you start going back, of like there's hidden details which aren't just from like obviously it's not just written as a story it happened, but like seeing these throughout is not like one, I'm sure God is like, here's a cool little thing that I'm
Yeah.
sure they'll enjoy reading, but also like it is like preeminent throughout the whole thing that like Jesus is God. He
Yeah.
save us. He came to forgive us from our sins. And like that's in the whole book.
Yeah.
It's not just like, oh, here's the Old Testament and then here's this Jesus guy. We're pretty sure it's related.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's been in here throughout the whole thing. There's prophecy of him. Like
Yeah.
I think even in Isaiah, there's like in Isaiah, like speaking about it, there's kind of a tie to the angel of the Lord. Um that just seeing like this all points to Jesus. It's not something that people are bringing up after the fact, trying to tie in the Jewish faith to Christian faith. That it's that the Christian faith is grafted on to the
Yeah.
Jewish faith. Um,
It's the culmination. It's
yeah,
uh, you know, we're talking about the angel of the Lord being present throughout the Old
yeah,
Testament. So Jesus was there, was,
yeah,
and not uninterested,
yeah,
not detached. And again, I think that's one of the saddest misconceptions that a lot of people have of like God the Father is, kind of an angry, grumpy old guy, and then Jesus is like really
yeah,
understanding and cool,
yeah,
and don't worry about it, bro. And first of all, I mean that's just so untrue.
yeah,
I mean, even when it talks about uh, for God so loved the world that He sent His only Son, like
yeah,
who sent His Son? So it's the Father, and what was it that motivated Him to send His Son?
yeah,
His love. And so, and then even the other idea that now that Jesus is here, we don't really need the Father, but Jesus says no one comes to the Father except through me. So the purpose of Jesus is a reuniting of us, to the Father
yeah,
in many ways. And anyhow, there's this beautiful combination. There's a beautiful unity and partnership between them. But even at the original fall, God is speaking the curse over Satan, over the snake, that you know Eve's seed is going to come and crush your head,
yeah,
and you'll bruise his heel. Speaking of Jesus there, but the Old Testament is filled with prophecies about Jesus. Even
yeah,
if you don't, read the Old Testament, haven't read it a lot, start reading through Isaiah, start reading
yeah,
through Jeremiah, start reading through the Psalms or some of these other books, and you'll start seeing, well, that is really obviously
yeah,
Jesus. And sometimes it seems like it's just put in this weird spot where they're
yeah,
not really talking about, hey, we're going to talk
yeah,
about this coming Messiah who's going to be here someday. It's kind of mixed into
yeah.
the story of God's people.
David just be like, who takes away the sins of the world? Like, what
Yeah.
the heck?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, these really cool, moments or phrases that speak about a Messiah that's coming, because Jewish people who don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, they're still waiting on a Messiah.
Yeah,
So the idea of a Messiah is not uh, separate from the
it's not
Jewish
additive.
faith.
Yeah,
The difference between a Christian Jewish person and a Jewish person who is doesn't believe that Jesus was the Christ. There's no argument over, is there
yeah,
a Messiah? It's just who is. But what I love about the angel of the Lord, because I think probably my favorite, I mean, all of them are awesome, but the Shadrach, Meshach, and
yeah,
Abednego in the fire, that we throw the three guys in, the fire's so hot that the guards that even throw them in are killed by it, and then he's sitting back, which is kind of just a messed up, demented.
yeah,
He's sitting back watching them burn is the idea of what he's trying to do, the king, and he sees that there's four in the fire, not the three, and Jesus was very involved,
yeah,
from the beginning. Obviously, still today, the Bible talks about he's, interceding on our behalf, and uh, but I think the idea of Jesus in the Old Testament, not just Jesus talked about in the Old Testament.
yeah,
One of the things I hope that it helps people do is don't be scared of your Old Testament.
yeah,
That it's not a separate story with different perspective and morals. That it's a pretty barbaric time for
yeah.
sure, but the heart of Jesus, the heart of the Father is so plainly
Yeah.
seen in both. And so, yeah, it's just really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. What are anything else that just kind of in this, through all of this, that has jumped out to you, or any just little nuggets through this that you think could be cool to
Uh,
share before wrap up
I mean,
things?
in the Mephibosheth story,
Yeah, of
when
course.
just the fact that he says you are like the angel of the Lord is basically like you read it real plain. It's like you are a type of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, yeah.
Like just that being so plainly. And I always root for Mephibosheth, so I'm like that's like really in the story. There's not, you know,
It's a pretty
like the fact that
profound
he
story.
sees the
Yeah,
the angel of the Lord, and it doesn't say like Mephibosheth like understood that that was the Messiah and everything,
yeah,
but just like him saying that of like you are like the angel of the Lord is like such a specific and really cool thing
yeah.
to
There's
me.
probably a lot there to mine, of even just what that means and
Yeah,
all what's there. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
It's awesome. It's amazing. And I love too that some of these conversations where maybe it feels like, um, is this significant? Is this important? Or is this a new
yeah.
wacky idea? I love when you go to the early church on something like this and you find not only the presence of the conversation, but how
Super
much
clear.
they wrote
Yeah,
about it and how clear they weren't saying, wouldn't it be neat if
yeah.
the idea,
Have you guys seen this new theory?
yeah, yeah, they straight up say that's Jesus.
Yeah,
That's the Son of God. That's not a
yeah,
created being. And they're not saying angels are always.
yeah,
They very clearly say something different, but uh Jesus prophesied about all throughout the Old Testament, but Jesus present
yeah,
in the Old Testament too. That's pretty cool. And that the character of the angel of the Lord that maybe you would just read right through, not
yeah,
noticing, um, is him revealing himself. That's the manifestation of Jesus in the Old Testament before the physical sent
yeah,
born to the Virgin Mary in the New Testament.
yeah,
So pretty cool
yeah.
conversation.
One really cool parallel that I kind of started reading through is that the first like appearance that you see is with Hagar,
Hmm.
and like her at a spring, like after she ran away, um like that being like the first thing you see like in the flesh or whatever
Yeah.
of Jesus. And then in the New Testament the first time he reveals himself at Messiah is at to the woman at the well, of like that being the revealing of like this like uh woman
Wow.
that's been sent off, Hagar, and then the woman at the well. I
Wow.
just saw that parallel that is like his
That's pretty
that
profound.
is super like his nature has not changed from Old Testament to New Testament.
Wow.
Like that is the same person, like the beginning of the book to like the end of the story.
Yeah. Wow, and that his heart, yeah,
It's the
he's
same.
not concerned with presenting
Yeah.
himself to kings and
Yeah.
to dignitaries, that the angel of the Lord, that Jesus, he's all about the outcast and the one that the world has
Yeah.
deemed insignificant.
Yeah.
That's where he's at. Wow, that's amazing. The first time that he says, "I am he," I'm the woman at the well, and to Hagar,
Yeah.
so she's a person who was used, abused, and tossed to the
Yeah.
side. That's where he shows up.
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing. Jesus is amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you, Isaiah, for being a part of this. I think one thing that has become completely clear, that your next episode on the podcast with me, we already know what that topic is about. So I look forward to getting that going sometime soon. We try to keep our podcast episodes between 30 and 45 minutes. So you're going to have to condense all the different things that
Stretch
you want
down
to
those
say.
12 verses total.
those
Try to only take an
the
hour a
50
verse.
hours worth of conversations
Yeah.
you could have about that. But I look forward to that episode. But thanks for being a part of this. This is really cool. Great conversation. Just love finding those connecting pieces and seeing it, the conversation in the early church. And so thanks for listening. I hope that if you hadn't had this conversation before, that maybe this was a good and healthy introduction for you into an important conversation. So please, like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. So we're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, follow us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify podcasts. So take some time to follow, tell your friends, share it so others can hear it too, see it too. And thanks for listening. And any questions or anything you have, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk to you. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
I'm not searching for some new truth. I'm just longing for the truth. You can't help but notice there's something missing. Would you help us get